Okay. All right, so we should be good to go now. I think we're recording. You can see it up there. Great. So hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Johnson, Program Coordinator with Buckeye Wellness out of the Office of the Chief Wellness Officer. And I was just sharing with everyone in the room, we are pivoting slightly, and we're now going to have our speaker joining us also via Zoom. So, we're here now, and then I'll switch things over to her when we get to her presentation. A couple of upcoming events that we have. We have the Live Well webinar series starting on November 30th. This will be a monthly series. And if you're not familiar with this, it is tips and strategies on how to bring wellness to the classroom. So if you work with students at all, it's a really great resource to learn how you can help boost your wellness and then also boost your students' wellness in the classroom. Our next Lunch and Learn will be on December 16th. We'll probably be back over in VRT, but if that changes, you'll see it up on Link to Health and Your Plan for Health if we're in a different room. We have our Dodgeball Classic on December 15th over at the RPAC. So you can start getting your teams together. That's a really fun event. It's a good way to boost team camaraderie and just have a really good time. People get very competitive, some friendly competition, very enjoyable. So hope to see you guys there. And then lastly, up there, we just have our group fitness classes as usual. We do have a new one starting in December. We're going to start having a Friday Zumba noon class. So if you ever attended any of Trina's classes, we're getting her back up and going on Friday for a little 30-minute lunchtime workout. So now during the presentation, you can put questions in the chat. For in person, we'll just raise hands and say them out loud and get them to our speaker with the remaining time that we have. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Dina, I'll let you get yours pulled up while I introduce you. So Dina Champion is our speaker today. She has been a registered dietitian since 2003. She completed her bachelor's degree in dietetics at Ohio University and her master's of science degree at Georgia State University in Atlanta. She joined the James Cancer Hospital in 2013 and is lead for the outpatient team. She also spends part of her time counseling oncology patients, spending time in the community with outreach programs, creating and presenting nutrition classes for cancer survivors. She also precepts dietetic internship students, completing their clinical hours as part of their requirements for becoming registered dietitians. Her favorite part of her job is empowering others with nutrition-related knowledge so that they feel more confident in making their own decisions. So please join me in welcoming Dina Champion.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry that I'm not in person. I completely misunderstood. And I haven't been asked to do anything in person in so long. But anyway, hopefully this works just as well. I am here to talk about healthy tips for the holiday season. I would love to answer any questions you guys have. I'm going to try to keep my presentation. I want to finish talking in about 40 minutes. So we have plenty of time for questions afterwards. So let's get started on what we're going to be talking about today. So I want to just start off with some nutrition basics, but most of what I want to talk about today is some tips and tricks for a healthy holiday season. And then I definitely want to cover some recipe ideas, which actually I believe Nicole is able to send you. I sent some recipes that are some of my favorites for the holidays that she will share with you if she hasn't already. So one of the first things I wanted to start with was that just sort of the quantity of food people tend to eat at their Thanksgiving meal. And if you want to use that link, that code, that will direct you to a Consumer Reports article about, kind of the average meal a person might eat for Thanksgiving, which I just thought that was kind of an interesting fact. And so if we're thinking about a healthier kind of holiday or a healthier holiday plate, you've probably seen a picture similar to this. This is kind of the way I often will teach people, sort of like if you're a visual person and you kind of want an idea of what a healthy plate might look like, this is a good tool to use. And so you think about that as half of your plate being those kind of non-starchy vegetables. So non-starchy would be most vegetables, lettuces, carrots, tomatoes, peppers, onions, garlic. Your starchy vegetables are going to be things like potatoes and corn and peas. And then, of course, starches include things like rice and pasta and that kind of thing. And then just a quarter of your plate protein. So many Americans, we kind of flip this, right? And so the protein tends to be half the plate. And then, the starch tends to be another at least quarter of the plate. And then our veggies are much smaller than maybe they should be. And so this is a good sort of tool. And this is not just for the holidays. These tips I'm going to give you today are truly for all year round. But this is an idea of what a healthier plate might look like. But let's really think about this and let's talk about what really matters. So truly one meal of the year really isn't going to make a huge impact on your health, right? So it's really not that big of a deal what you eat one day of the year. Of course, there are some exceptions. Of course, if you have an allergy, you can't eat a food you're allergic to and expect to have a happy, healthy holiday, right? There are certain chronic conditions like kidney disease where it may be dangerous to eat too much potassium, but I'm talking about for the general public, one meal of the year really doesn't matter. Chronic diseases and chronic health conditions are multifactorial. They don't happen after eating one meal. And then I think also when we think about diet and we think about what we put in our bodies, I think it's really important for success and for health to kind of think about what matters to you. So instead of thinking about, oh, I want to go on this diet to lose 15 pounds, maybe you're thinking more about, I want to be healthier. I want to feel better. I want to maybe get off medications, that kind of thing. So I like thinking about the big picture. This is kind of what a typical holiday plate might look like. And so if you look at that plate, that's about 1,500 calories. And so I think what's important here, again, it's not so much to worry too much about that one meal, but I think what happens for a lot of people is that one meal turns into a week or 2 weeks or a month. So for a lot of people, it becomes this time all the way from Thanksgiving to Christmas sort of becomes this holiday free for all. So one meal like this, not such a big deal, but multiple meals, multiple days, that can really add up and can, take a toll on your health or your waistline. So I think it's really important that holiday season is not a time of deprivation. Even if you're somebody struggling with weight management or trying to lose weight, it's still like, I just don't subscribe to that. I think the holidays should be filled with foods that you love. But instead, today we're going to talk about some things that might help set you up for success. Still eating those foods you enjoy. It may even be helpful if you've been on, maybe you're on a weight loss journey, maybe you've lost some weight and you're worried about the holiday season coming up. Sometimes it might be an okay idea to shift your focus to just sort of weight maintenance during the holiday season instead of even trying to with that continued weight loss, just depending on where you're at. So I'm going to go over 10 of my favorite tips for a healthy holiday season. And I want to preface this by saying that everybody's different. And so these tips are not going to maybe speak to you, to all of you, right? So my hope is that you may find a few in here that are really helpful. A lot of these aren't going to work for you because I don't know what does work for you. So that's my first tip, is think about what works for you. So I always think about this. Number one tip is, what are your triggers? So if you're thinking about a holiday season and you're thinking about habits that are unhealthy, what triggers those for you? Is it drinking alcohol? You know, we tend to go to more parties and we do more sort of social events during the holidays. And so for some people, alcohol, yes, it has calories, but it also lowers your inhibitions. So you might be eating more than you normally would. And for me, I know that sometimes even just one glass of wine really it makes me want to sleep in the next day and not get up to do my workout. So for me, I know that alcohol can sort of have this spiral effect. So I know that's a huge one for me, and I have to be really careful about my alcohol intake for that reason. Are your triggers the break room? You know, going in the break room and there's, gosh, our patients bring us tons of food, or our coworkers bring us food, and there's always cupcakes and cookies and all of those kinds of things. Is that a trigger for you? Or are parties a trigger for you? And this is kind of a joke, but not really. Is your mother-in-law a trigger for you? So I think about like family in general. You're spending time with family, and maybe there are certain people in your family that push your buttons and make it really challenging to not overindulge on the alcohol or the cupcakes or the cookies or whatever it may be. And then, so you're thinking about your triggers first. What are those things that really get you sort of off track? So you want to keep those in your mind, and then thinking about what does work for you. Okay. So maybe for me, it's really monitoring my alcohol intake. So maybe I'm just not going to drink at a party, or I'm only going to have one cocktail. Maybe for you, what works is truly just indulging in your favorite foods and just, really, really enjoying them. A lot of dietitians will give those tips, like if you're craving something creamy, like ice cream, have an avocado. And I'm like, that doesn't work for me. If I'm craving ice cream, I'm going to eat the good ice cream, but I'm going to really enjoy it. Otherwise, I'm just going to be thinking about it. And then I'm going to eat the avocado and eat the ice cream as well. So that works better for me. But that's not true for everybody. Some people really do better with some healthy swaps. So maybe you have a high calorie dish that you love that you're going to make healthier this year and eat that. That's fine too. Does exercise work for you? And what do I mean by that? So I personally really like using exercise as a way to move my body, manage my stress, mother-in-law stress, and family stress too, right? It really helps me manage my stress. It also just sort of, for me, it kind of sets the tone for the day. So when I do a really vigorous workout in the morning, I sort of just feel better. And I don't know, it makes me want to take care of myself in a better way. So I know my sister-in-law and I have our, Thanksgiving morning classes already booked to go to the gym. So I personally am like really excited about that. So that's something that works for me. And then I also think what really is helpful is like just keeping in mind what's important. I'm sure some of you that I'm speaking with have direct patient care. We know that our patients deal with so much, right? So many, I work in oncology. So I like to think about like, gosh, what is really important? It's my family, it's my friends, it's that I'm able to enjoy food. And so that really helps me keep things in perspective. And so I don't get down on myself if I'm like enjoying something really yummy. Because that's not what's important is the big picture, right? So then after you kind of examine those things, your triggers, what works for you, then you want to kind of think about putting it all together. So what does that look like for you? Is it for me, like sticking with that exercise routine? I've already got my Thanksgiving morning exercise class scheduled. In between holidays, which is where people really struggle, instead of, feeling like, oh gosh, I overindulged for Thanksgiving weekend, so I'm just going to keep it going all year, or I'm sorry, all until Christmas. Maybe instead you're making your foods at home more often. Maybe you're avoiding alcohol. Maybe you're avoiding the break room. Maybe you're really focusing on your time with your family and friends. So number 2 is build that healthy plate we talked about. And I'm going to show you some more pictures of what that might look like, because people are always like, well, what does a healthy plate mean? And this doesn't go for, again, just that one meal. That's not really what's most important over time. It's what we do most days. So when you think about building a healthy plate, you want to fill up on veggies, which have tons of vitamins and minerals and fiber, phytochemicals and antioxidants, and all of those wonderful things for our bodies, choosing less starchy foods. But if they're really enjoyable, there's no reason to skip those foods. I love carbohydrates, so I am certainly not going to skip the carbs. I'm just going to be mindful of how many I eat and make sure I'm also eating plenty of veggies. Same with bread. Sometimes we end up just mindlessly eating bread and we're not even really enjoying it. I think it's great to start with a salad or a broth-based soup, which we're also going to talk about here in a second. So here's that picture again. I just wanted to remind you what that looks like. And then sort of, if you're a visual person, sort of another idea of, if you see that plate on the left, it's like tons of starch. I don't really see any vegetables. I guess looks like maybe a green bean casserole with lots of cream. And on the right, you've got more of like maybe sauteed green beans without all of the cream sauce. You've got sweet potatoes or maybe some squash. You've got your turkey. So just like kind of trying to think about that throughout the year. And so then this is another sort of same picture, same idea, but thinking about, okay, how do I build my plate? You got lots of veggies there, which, I mean, I love vegetables. I do recognize not everybody does. So if you're somebody who doesn't love veggies, maybe there's a couple that you really enjoy that you can put on your plate there. And then smaller amounts of the protein and the carbohydrates. This one can really help people too. So instead of filling up on those high calorie foods like bread, right? That's one of the things we tend to in this country. We tend to eat a lot of bread before we even start our meal. But it might be helpful, honestly, to try to eat some of those lower calorie foods first, like veggies and salads and broth-based soups are really filling and satisfying, and then move on to the higher calorie foods so that you're not eating those higher calorie foods when you're starving. So maybe you sit down, look at your plate, and you start with that brothy soup or that salad, slow down, and then move on to your higher calorie foods. This one's so important too. And I will be the first to tell you that I used to do this. I was kind of raised to do this. So I remember being young and I remember my family being like, oh, don't eat breakfast because we've got a huge meal coming for Thanksgiving dinner, which was at like 4:00. And I'm like, now I'm thinking, that was horrible advice. There's no reason to skip meals and go into that Thanksgiving meal starving so that you stuff yourself and feel horrible. I am a huge believer in not skipping meals just because it's Thanksgiving or Christmas. So you don't want to starve yourself or overindulge. You want to make sure you are filling up on healthy, nourishing foods during the day. Same with parties, because like I said, remember, it's not just that one meal, it's the whole season. So if I'm going to a little holiday party tonight, I'm not going to show up to it starving, because that just sets you up for failure, right? And then I personally I really, really don't like that feeling of being super full. So trying not to skip meals and sort of save room for that large meal. Another one is that tip of just moving, and that can mean so many different things. It might be a walk. It might be a class. There's so many online workouts we can do now. I remember one year we had a push-up contest, and that used to be fun when my nephews were little, and now they can crush me in push-ups. So it's not so much fun when you lose, but those kinds of things can be fun to do with your family. And again, for me, and everybody's different, so you've got to kind of think about these tips and pull out what works for you. For me, using that exercise as a tool for reducing stress and sort of setting the tone for the day is very helpful. Let's even expand that. Setting the tone for the season can be really helpful. You've all probably heard this tip before. This is nothing new, right? If you're going to a party, bring a healthy dish so you know there's something healthy there that you can fill up on. That doesn't mean it's the only thing you should eat, but when you're thinking about building that plate, at least you have something that you can put on your plate that's going to sort of serve that purpose of like filling your plate with something nourishing. So maybe it's some sort of roasted vegetable dish or salad or something you really enjoy. Of course, if you're somebody who grazes like I am, probably not a good idea to mingle by the food, which is what we tend to do, right? Walk away from the food or chew gum so that you're not just mindlessly picking. Drink water or sparkling water. If you are drinking alcohol, really good idea to try to drink alcohol and then water, then alcohol to kind of mix in so you're not overdoing the alcohol. And here we go. That leads us to this alcohol tip here. Now, of course, alcohol contains a lot of calories. I heard somebody the other day tell me that they told me that vodka had no calories. That is not true. Vodka does have calories. Hard alcohol does have calories. Alcohol has 7 calories per gram of alcohol. So hard alcohol does have calories. It's lower in calories than many things. But it is not calorie free. So if you think about like a cup of eggnog, that's really creamy and rich, and that's 350 calories. So, just something to keep in mind. If that is your favorite thing and it's the best thing about the holidays, by all means, enjoy it. But if it's not, and you're just drinking it because it's there, that might be something you skip. Hard alcohol with regular soda or juice is also a good amount of calories. Wine, a little bit less. And so I think what's important here is think about how the alcohol affects you. If it really doesn't, if you can have a couple of drinks, wake up in the morning and feel great and do your thing, okay. If you're somebody like me who even just one drink can really kind of make you less energetic and less likely to eat right and exercise the next day, might be a good idea to consider skipping it at least some of the time. Those are some tips for some low calorie beverages, like a wine spritzer where you do some wine with sparkling water. That's not my favorite thing to drink. I just don't enjoy it that much, but some people love that. So that's an option. Sparkling water. I do like this sparkling water with a little splash of juice, or even like usually there's a fruit tray or some kind of fruit. Berries are awesome in sparkling water that you can mix in there for some extra flavor. Some people really love using this mindfulness tool that I'm going to give you. So, that would be another thing to think about. We've all been there where, you spend like all day or half a day cooking this meal, and then you sit down and it's gone in 5 minutes, right? So, and same thing with parties and going out to restaurants, and you're having all of these wonderful foods during the holiday season, but you're not even mindful of them. And that tends to lead to, of course, overeating, and it leads to a less satisfying meal. So being mindful can definitely help. This is one that is really challenging for busy people, because oftentimes we are busy during the normal work week. And so we're used to sort of scarfing our food down at the chance we can get, right? Because we just don't have a lot of time. And that can sort of translate into the rest of our lives. So even when you sit down and you have plenty of time, you're just in that habit of eating really quickly. So this one's hard for me. I've really got to like sit down, put my fork down, look at my food, enjoy my food, slow down. Actually, one of my favorite things to do is look at a child eat. When I look at my nephew who's 6 and my niece who's 3, when I watch them eat, it's just such a different, they're really slow, they're talking, they're, looking at things, they'll eat a bite, they stop when they're satisfied. And that's something we lose as we get to be an adult. This is the mindful eating skill that is really helpful for some people. If this is something that works for you, I've even had people print this and kind of keep this with them when they eat meals. Might be a little funny to bring this to a party, but maybe when you're at home, you can kind of practice this. And so we think of that number 3, that hunger point, as being that strong urge to eat. And so that's kind of what we want to avoid, getting those numbers 1, 2, and even when we get to 3, we kind of don't want to get ever to where we're beyond hungry, where you just feel horrible, when you're so famished that you can't even imagine trying to make something, right? That's when we make really poor decisions. And so that is exactly what happens when you skip meals before a large holiday feast, right? So you get to that beyond hungry or famished point, and then you make really horrible choices. And not only that, but you feel bad afterwards. So this can be a tool to really help. So when you get to that kind of hungry, slightly hungry stage, that's when you think about, okay, is it mealtime? Is it time to eat a snack? And then when you get to that satisfied to full point there, number 6 and 7 is kind of where you want to kind of slow down and think, all right, have I had enough? And we kind of want to avoid getting to that 8 or 9. It's okay. It's human nature to do that, but it's just a place we don't want to be getting to all of the time for all of our meals. Avoid grazing. I wrote, don't be a giraffe because giraffes are grazers. I couldn't think of another animal to put on there. Cows are grazers too, but I thought that sounded kind of mean. Don't be a cow, right? But what we want to do is avoid all day grazing. So I'm huge on, when I'm baking, I want to taste everything. It's okay to taste things, but try to avoid tasting things all day. A big one is not keeping food out all day. For one, some foods really should be refrigerated for food safety, but it also increases mindless eating. When you've got cookies laid out all over your counter where you can just grab them without even thinking about it, that doesn't necessarily set you up for success. And so kind of get your food cleaned up, put it away. That can really help. Kind of same idea. Send food home with guests, freeze your foods, eat them slowly. I actually have a slide coming up on freezing that we can talk a little bit about. One of the other things, and I know this sounds really obvious, but a lot of people fall into this, is skip the foods you don't love. So if there are, if somebody brings pie or cookies and it's not even a pie or cookie you love, skip it. I give you permission. You don't have to taste everything. You don't have to eat cookies just because grandma made them or whatever. Enjoy the food you love and really enjoy them. But if there's something you don't really like and you take a bite of it and you're like, you don't have to finish it. And that's one that a lot of people struggle with. Again, I think I've said this many times in different ways. We're not talking about one meal. One meal is not that big of a deal. Think about the holiday as a season. And so think about making good choices for the season, making sure we're filling up on veggies and low calorie foods for the weeks from Thanksgiving to Christmas and New Year's. Not a big deal to eat, foods that aren't necessarily the healthiest that one day. There's no reason to feel guilty. What's important is getting back on track the next day. All right. And so I shared some recipes, but I want to go over a few things too that I think are also really helpful. And these tips are going to be a little bit different. So this is one of my huge points for many times when I'm teaching a patient or a client about healthy eating habits, is we focus so much on things that we shouldn't have. So we focus so much on don't eat too many carbs, don't eat all that gravy, don't eat all the butter on the bread, don't, all of the don'ts. So instead, I really love to focus on things that you can do that are maybe like fun and exciting, right? So maybe you're trying a new recipe. A lot of people I have found, I teach some cooking classes, and one of the things that I find consistently as in season, like squashes, which are delicious and most people do really enjoy. People are afraid to cook them. So I do have a slide coming up to kind of talk about what you do with a squash, but oh my gosh, so healthy, like super high in vitamin A, super high in vitamin C, fiber, so flavorful, lots of antioxidants in there, but people are afraid to use it. So maybe you try a new squash recipe this season. Or any new flavorful plant heavy recipe. I mean, just a simple vegetable soup or stew is really delicious. These are some of my favorite places to get some plant heavy meals. Vegan Risha, her food is vegan, delicious, so many different herbs and spices, and it's just like really different foods. She's got a lot of like one pot meals and even Instapot meals. Minimalist Baker, also really simple recipes. Oh, She Glows is a good one. And then Cookie and Katie are good. That's a good one too. So if you're somebody who enjoys trying new things, those are some great places to start. So I did include this recipe. So you will be getting a copy of this. If you have never had farro, it's delicious. And you actually, if you're like, I don't want to try something new, I don't want to do this farro, I don't know what that is, you can substitute the farro for brown rice. But farro is it's a whole grain. It's kind of, I would describe it as similar to barley. It's kind of like it's got a nice like chewy texture. It's so good. It's one of my favorites, and you can use it really any place you would use rice. This salad is one of my faves. It's got tons of flavor, lots of fiber. It's a really delicious side dish, and it's really good leftover. The flavors just, I think, even get better overnight. So again, you do have a copy of that recipe. That's a really, really yummy one. This is also a great one if you have family members or if you yourself are vegetarians, because I know that sometimes that can be a challenge for people who, don't eat meat and they don't have a lot of choices. So that's a good one if you're struggling with that. This also, so I made this recipe at a cooking class maybe a month ago, and I had actually never tried this before, but this is it's a big salad with a cranberry vinaigrette dressing. And, cranberries are one of those seasonal fruits that we really don't eat throughout the year. But after this dressing, I've been making after using this recipe in a class, I've been making this dressing, and you can actually use fresh or frozen cranberries. I found frozen cranberries at Lucky's in Clintonville. So I know that they do exist if you don't want to buy fresh, or if you're wanting to make this year round when you can't get fresh cranberries. The dressing is so good. It's really creamy. It's got tons of flavor. In fact, if you just want to use the dressing recipe and put this on your own salad, that would work too. This is also a really good side dish. And you will get that recipe as well. Not wanting to advance my slide. Then there is also a healthy stuffing recipe on there. I will say, I don't want anyone to get, into a situation where it's like, we make, Aunt Jane's stuffing every year and everybody loves it. I mean, maybe you just stick with the same family traditional recipes, but why do we only eat stuffing on Thanksgiving? It can be a really healthy option. So I did include a really yummy stuffing recipe. And I'm guilty of it too. I just kind of don't think about making a stuffing any other time besides Thanksgiving or Christmas. But we're actually my husband and I were like, we are going to make this year because we really like this particular recipe, and it's like super light and flavorful. This can also be vegetarian. I think the recipe calls for chicken broth, but just sub it out with veggie broth if you would prefer it to be vegetarian. This recipe, I don't think is in the packet, but you can see right there where to find it. It's at Cookie and Katie, and it's called Deb's Kale Salad with apples, cranberries, and pecans. This is really delicious. I personally love this salad with dried cherries instead of the cranberries. You can also use walnuts or almonds instead of pecans. Really, really yummy. Okay, so I promised you a little bit about squash. So don't be afraid to use squash. It's super good. It's not scary. So if you have never cooked with a squash, I'm going to give you these really easy steps on how to do it. You always want to wash the outside. That goes for melons as well. Okay, if you think about it, you're putting a knife through the skin of something that's been sitting on the ground. You want to wash all the bacteria off. So you're going to slice it and you're going to wash the outside. Then you don't have to use this tip, but I really like this. Butternut squash is really hard to cut. It can, like, if you don't have a good knife, it can be really challenging. So if you have your oven on, put the whole squash in the oven for maybe 10 minutes. If not, put it in the microwave for maybe, depending on the size of the squash, 3 to 5 minutes. It's going to soften it up a little bit so that cutting through is not so hard. So after washing, you're going to warm it if you want. You're going to slice it in half. That's what you're going to see there. You're going to remove the seeds, and then you're going to cut the bulb off the end. Sometimes I just throw that out because sometimes the meat of the squash is only like that thin. You just kind of have to look. And then you're going to take your knife and you're going to slice the skin off with a sharp knife. You're going to cube, toss in olive oil, salt and pepper, or canola oil if you want. Bake at 425 until it's nice and golden brown. It's delicious. I promise you it's not hard. Kale. I have literally had patients say to me as soon as I walk in their room, I don't like kale. It's okay. You don't have to like kale. But I do want to say a couple of things about it. I think sometimes people just don't prepare it correctly. So kale is very tough. It's got big ribs going down the center. Take those ribs off first. They're edible, but they're not super fun to eat. Then I'm really a big fan of chopping it really finely, almost shredding it. And then I also think it's very helpful to put a little bit of the dressing you're using on it and massage it really well with your hands. That really helps tenderize the kale, and it gets the dressing to coat it really well. And so if you've never tried doing it that way, that makes a huge difference. If you still hate it, it's okay. There's plenty of other vegetables that are really good for you. You don't have to like kale. So leftovers, I promised to talk about this. So freeze your food, right? Instead of letting it go to waste. There's so many things that can freeze. I'm not going to read all of this to you because I think you're all capable of reading, but these are some things that freeze really well. And then some things that don't freeze really well. Something to keep in mind, if you have family members that like to leave hot food that should be hot out for hours and hours and hours, you really should not leave those foods out more than 2 hours because it can be unsafe. So if you've got something that's been, I remember one year somebody forgot that they had put the cut up turkey in the oven to like sort of store for a minute. The oven was off, totally forgot. It sat there all night. Well, that is not safe to eat anymore. Despite the fact that I think my grandpa did still eat it, but those are things that really you shouldn't eat after a couple of hours. So you shouldn't freeze them after a couple hours either, just for food safety. Some tips, just in case you aren't somebody who freezes food a whole lot. You want to make sure your food's nice and cool. All right. So, I freeze a lot of things at my house. Like if I make a soup or a casserole, you want to make sure it's really cool. Then you want to put it in a container or a baggie. You want to remove the air. You want to freeze it as soon as you know you're going to freeze it. So definitely within 3 days, but the sooner the better. You can use like freezer quality bags or containers. I mean, I've just used even just plastic Tupperwares. Usually want to eat those things within 3 to 4 months. I personally like to freeze in whatever portion size I'm going to use. So if I'm making a soup, for example, I'm going to freeze it in a lunch size serving so that then if I'm like, oh gosh, I don't have anything for my lunch today, I pull out that lunch size serving. You can do this with casseroles. You can do this with turkey. One of the things on here, don't freeze food you don't like. If you don't like it, just give it to somebody or get rid of it. The freezer is certainly not going to make it taste better. It's just going to take up storage space. Again, don't freeze things that have been left out at unsafe temperatures. And since we're talking about that, Thanksgiving is a time of year that there are lots of foodborne illnesses, and a lot of times because we're practicing things that are unsafe, like we are leaving food out too long. So you want to keep your hot food hot and your cold food cold, making sure you're washing your hands and your surfaces well, rinsing produce, thawing properly. So if you have a frozen turkey, you want to thaw that, you want to start thawing that, sometimes even a couple of days before, if it's a large turkey, do that in the refrigerator. You can also do it in the microwave. One of the things that you don't want to do is leave it just sitting on the counter. That is not a safe way of thawing a meat. I won't read these, but here are some proper cooking temperatures. So just so you know, it is important to check those temperatures. That 2-hour rule is there again. Also, if you are eating leftovers, you really do want to eat those within 3 to 4 days. Otherwise, for most things, you want to throw it out after that. If you do want more information, the USDA has a good consumer guide on roasting turkey. So you can pull that up and look at that in more detail. And these are some healthy swaps. I will not read all of these to you, but you do have this in your handout. So this can help people, just gives like, if the recipe calls for X, use Y. So that might help some of you too. Some healthy substitutions using whole wheat instead of white, oats instead of breadcrumbs. You can put cauliflower, mashed and potatoes, which I actually like. I like the taste of that. Not everybody does. That's okay. Adding pureed veggies, adding greens to mac and cheese or pastas. These are all helpful tips. This is a video. If you want to watch this, this is actually a recipe that uses avocado toast with like a tomato jam. One of the reasons I included this is because I love the recipe for pickled onions. It's just like a quick pickle that you do in the refrigerator. I put these pickled onions on like my sandwiches, my salads, my stir fries, and my tacos. Add so much flavor. So if that's something you're interested, check out that video. I did not create that video. That was one of the chefs in the department that did that. So overall, we want to really think about knowing those triggers, knowing what your goals are. Is your goal, maybe your goal is just to maintain, eating at home most days of the week through the holiday season. Maybe your goal is to maintain your exercise routine through the holiday season. Maybe your goal is to maintain your weight and not gain weight. Maybe you want to think about adding more veggies. Maybe you want to think about those healthy swaps. Again, it doesn't make sense for me to tell you what to do. It makes more sense for you to think about everything we talked about today and pull out some tips that work best for you. And then I think super important is to be kind to yourself and enjoy your holidays, because that's really what it's all about, right? No reason to feel bad about yourself or to feel bad because you kind of got off track. So with that, let's see, we've got plenty of time for questions, and I am happy. I see a couple in the chat and I will answer those. So I've got one question. Do you have recommendations to add crunch to some of those recipes for those with nut allergies? Walnuts and pecans are everywhere this time of year, but unfortunately can't use them. So you can, of course, you can leave them off, but you could also do, depending on the recipe, seeds. So hemp seeds, if seeds are okay, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, all add a little bit of crunch and also add a lot of nutrition, which is super great. If you've never had hemp seeds, those are usually, you find those the same aisle you would find nuts. They are, they do add a little bit of crunch. They're super neutral in flavor. You can put them on a salad. You can put them really anywhere, a casserole, a stir fry. They are really high in omega-3 fats, which are those anti-inflammatory fats that are so good for us. I love using those. So that may help too. Let's see, what about almonds? Oh, I think somebody was just trying to answer. Crispy chickpeas, seeds. Okay, any other, let's see. Oh, somebody said that they love Cookie and Katie. I do too. It's one of my favorites. What other questions do you guys have?
Let me ask our audience here. Does anybody here in person have a question for our?
Or a comment.
Or comment, anything. All right, well, in case while we wait, in case any more questions come in, I just want to say thank you, Dina, for sharing all of your knowledge with us and taking us through all of these healthy little tidbits and strategies that we can take with us through the holiday season, as well as just in general daily life. So thank you so much for being here. Like you had mentioned a couple times, I did send out the slides and the recipes to everyone this morning. I'll send them out again with a follow-up email. So you'll be receiving all of that information, as well as if you're online, you'll be getting a link to a little evaluation. If you could take a couple minutes to fill out. We always appreciate some comments, suggestions, topics you want to see, all of that good stuff. So any questions? Again, we'll go back to questions. Oh, we got a comment. Baby kale.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a good tidbit, using the baby kale over.
Yeah, that is a good tidbit, because that is, the baby kale is so much more tender. It's almost more like a spinach. So yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Also sauteing kale. So some of the salads actually taste really good warm. So you could even, like, I find that sauteing it, like, that really helps soften it up and it changes the texture. So sometimes people who don't love that, like, you know, kind of chewy, thick texture, like it better cooked or sauteed.
All right. Anything else? All right. Well, I can keep this up in case anything else comes through. But again, thank you, Dina, for being here. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. If you're in person, you filled out an evaluation, you can either leave it at your table or return it back at the front table with Emily where you signed in. And then I guess everyone have a great day, great weekend, a great holiday season with Thanksgiving coming up. So like I said, I'll keep the Zoom up in case we have any more questions coming in, but thank you, everybody.